This episode is brought to you by Thorne, the industry leader in nutritional solutions. Now, Thorne is actually trusted by 8 US national teams and championship teams in the NFL, NBA, and Major League, as well as recently becoming the official sports performance nutrition partner of the UFC. So when it comes to supplements, the tactical athlete space and the athletic space need two things. We need efficacy, meaning the products do what they say they're going to do on the label, and then we need to trust the fact that we are not going to fail either athletic drug tests or work-related drug tests. Now, Thorne has actually been around since the 1980s, where they were used by physicians and hospitals for nutritional supplements for the patients. They were so successful that athletic teams and even special operations teams reached out to them and they started supplying them as well. Very recently, they actually opened their doors to the general public. Now, what sets Thorne apart is they manufacture their own products in a state-of-the-art NSF-certified facility in South Carolina. They use only the purest possible ingredients formulated with no stearates or arbitrary fillers in the cleanest manufacturing process. Most of you listening come from a profession where it can take its toll physically and mentally, and many of us are not able to bolster our nutrition purely with the food that we eat. And that's where supplementation comes in. So if you're ready to maximize your health and performance, visit thorne.com, thorne.com. Take a short product quiz to be paired up with the perfect health and fitness supplements. And for you, the audience, if you use the code BTS10, behind the shield 10, BTS10, you will get 10% off your first order. And if you want to learn even more about Thorne, go to episode 323 of Behind the Shield podcast, and you will hear my interview with Wes Barnett and Joel Totoro from Thorne. This episode is sponsored by 511, a company that I've used for well over a decade and continue to use to this day. And 511 is offering you guys, the audience of the Behind the Shield podcast, a discount on every purchase you make with them. Before we get to that code, I want to highlight a couple of products that, again, I personally use today. One of the most impressive products they just released is their Rush Backpack 2.0. Now, for many of you, whether you're going to the fire station, the police station, whether you're traveling with your family, whether you're taking training courses, we have to fly, we have to drive, we have to take trains. And I have to say, I own multiple backpacks, many of 511's different ones, but as far as a day pack, this one was the most impressive. There are so many different compartments. The way it sits on your back is incredibly comfortable. If you are a concealed carry person, there's also a spot for a weapon. So they've thought of multiple things that a man or woman would have to do on a daily basis. That is in addition to all of the products that I talk about a lot. Their uniforms, fit for men or fit for women in the first responder professions. The footwear that they offer, whether it's the Norris sneaker or the Atlas system that is designed for foot health and therefore knees and back and hips and shoulders and neck. As a civilian, I live in a lot of their clothes as well. Their jeans stretch. You can actually squat down in them. We live in Florida here, so I wear a lot of their shorts, which again, very, very lightweight material. You can get it wet and it will dry almost immediately. And then moving to the fitness and tactical space, I used to have just a regular weight vest. Recently, I switched to a 511 vest and actually bought ballistic plates as well. My thinking was simply, if I'm going to have a vest, why not have one that protects me as well? And that TAC vest is trusted by law enforcement all around the country. So I mentioned they were going to offer you a discount code. So if you go to 511tactical.com and enter the code SHIELD15, SHIELD15, you will get 15% off, not just that one purchase, but every time you visit their store. And if you want to learn more about 511, their mission, their products, then listen to episode 338 of the Behind the Shield podcast with the CEO and founder, Francisco Morales. Welcome to episode 458 of Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name is James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome on the show Greg Kelley. Now, this is such an important conversation for a multitude of reasons, and you will hear this story is pertaining ultimately to law enforcement, but there are parallels in fire, in EMS, in medicine. When we are charged or we have the responsibility of people's lives, we can either save them, improve them, or we have the power to destroy them. Whether we make a bad call in medicine, whether we don't find someone in a fire, or whether we use poor ethics in law enforcement, in investigation. And Greg's courageous story is a prime example of that. As a promising high school athlete, he was falsely accused of sexual abuse of a child. There are two tragedies in this. Firstly, Greg was convicted, saw 3 years in prison, and then an additional 3 years while his legal team fought for his complete innocence. The second part of this tragedy is for 6 years, the true offender roamed free and ultimately committed other sexual assaults. So this is such a powerful conversation, and Greg is so courageous in telling it because it must be haunting, and having to recount it again must be traumatic. So I admire him for stepping up to tell us, the first responder of the community, his story. It is beautifully portrayed in the documentary Outcry, but I was lucky enough to get him on here as well. But this is a cautionary tale for all of us, whether it's hiring practices and standards, whether it's training, and whether it's us, ownership. When we deviate from the ethics, from the mission of what we're supposed to do when we're wearing the badge, we destroy lives. So I hope you listen to this all the way through. I hope you have the humility to learn from it and understand that it isn't pointing fingers or throwing stones in a glass house. It's learning from a tragic domino effect of poor decisions and lack of professionalism that almost destroyed multiple lives in the process. So before we get to that conversation, as I say every week, please just take a moment and go to whichever app you listen to this on. Subscribe to the show, leave feedback. I love reading your feedback, and leave a rating. Every 5-star rating truly elevates this podcast, making it easier and easier for others to find. And this is a free library of over 450 episodes now. And all I ask in return is that you help share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to everyone else who needs to hear them. So with that being said, I introduce to you Greg Kelley. Enjoy. So Greg, I want to start by saying thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. I watched Outcry a while ago. I literally rewatched it the last couple of days. So it's kind of surreal. I was telling my wife this the other day, like when I'm watching someone on a show and then immediately get to interview them like this. So thank you for taking the time to come on today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So for people listening, where on planet Earth are we finding you today?
I'm currently in Leander, Texas, the north city of Austin, Texas. Grew up here all my life, born and raised, Leander, Texas. Currently here on break from college. I got one more year of college and I got 4 more years to play football and continue that journey and that career. But yeah, I'm in my hometown.
Beautiful. Yeah, and you see just finished the final, so I appreciate you taking some time out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then, chronologically speaking, starting at the very beginning, tell me about where you were born, and then tell me your family dynamic, what your parents did, and how many siblings.
Yeah. So, of course, I was born here in Leander, Texas, actually in Georgetown, Texas. It's ironic because Georgetown, Texas is also a city where, a chapter of my life opened up that I didn't necessarily ask for, but it did. But I was born in Georgetown, it's right next to Leander, but I grew up in Leander. I went to school in Leander, made friends, and had older brothers. I had 4 older brothers, all athletes. I actually have a sister. She lives in another state, but we're close. 2 parents, a mother and father, and both parents love their kids very much, worked very hard to make sure that their kids are well off, what they needed to be successful. And I grew up playing sports, grew up in middle school playing multiple different sports, basketball, football, a little bit of baseball, and then went into, high school at Leander High School. My freshman year, my 8th grade year in middle school, I became friends with a girl named Gabrielle Anderson. And it's a funny story. We actually were friends, and we met in math class. And I wasn't always, the best student in 8th grade, just because, I had dyslexia and I was suffering from distractions. And and I just really didn't necessarily focus on school that much, in 8th grade. I just wanted to play sports, but she's incredibly smart, and we would always, just so happen to sit next to each other in math class. And I figured out really quick that she was super smart, and I asked her for help multiple times. I really didn't ask for help. I probably just cheated off of her, but we got to talking a lot, man, and we grew a liking for each other, and we both thought we were cute, and we became friends. And I think that we were kind of in the friend zone for a little while as we went to Slitterbahn, which is a water park here in Texas, together with friends and stuff like that. But 9th grade year came around, and I got the courage to finally ask her out, and she she pretty much told me that I'll give you a chance, I'll go out with you, and that just led on to us, man, falling in love. And we grew up in high school together. She was the dance captain of her dance team, and I was playing football, and I got really serious with football to a point where I wanted to go to college and play. And so I ended up going to college, or I ended up playing football up to a point where I got a scholarship to go to college. I got multiple different scholarships to go to college. And junior year came around, and one of the most terrible, horrendous, nightmarish things happened, where I got accused of a crime I didn't do. Not just a crime I didn't do, but one of the most frowned upon crimes, hated crimes in the history of humanity. And I was an 18-year-old kid with a whole future ahead of him that did not know how to take it, because I just didn't live a life where I was expected to get accused of something. And it was a tragedy, because I was so focused on going to football, gaining the respect of people to make it out of Leander and go make something of myself. And a few things along the line happened with my family being medically ill to put me in a position to live in a house where I had to live a year before an accusation was made about me. And so for 8 months, I lived in that house, which was ran by, it was an in-home daycare. And I had to do that because both my parents were medically ill and they couldn't take care of me. But 8 months into that, I moved out. And a month later, after I moved out of that house, I was accused of this crime.
Well, going back, because obviously we'll get deep into that in a little bit, but going back before, I think, one of the most incredible things is, as a freshman, you were playing on a varsity team. Have I got that right?
So freshman year, kind of. I mean, freshman year, at the end of the year, I got pulled up for varsity for playoffs. But my sophomore and my junior year, I was playing. I had to fill some shoes. I had to step into some shoes and play in the varsity level. Right.
So before we even get into the Outcry and obviously the heart-wrenching story that followed after that, what was it, when you look back now, mentally and physically, that carried you on that trajectory to being such a phenomenal athlete?
I just think, a little bit of just natural born talent got me to the door, I guess you could say, and got some heads turning. I was always a little bit bigger physically than everybody else. And the other part was just my work ethic. I loved being in the gym. I loved working out. I felt like that was a release for me, as far as getting away from, like I said, I struggle with dyslexia and a little bit of ADHD. And that was a little bit of, me finding my norm, which was in the gym, getting better. And I knew that at the time, I didn't know how great I could be at academics until I applied myself, until I actually believed in myself and had confidence and courage to step out of all the excuses I was making for myself with dyslexia and all that, until I actually, got down to it and figured it out and just busted my butt to make it work. And so I had every excuse in the book academically. So I try to fill the void with working out as much as I can. And that helped me in a sense. It got me more athletic and turned a lot of heads. But I got to a point where I figured out I was pretty good at football, my freshman year. And I wanted to take advantage of it to make it to college.
Now, your mom was obviously an immigrant, just like I am, in the US. When you look back now, because obviously as we talked about the story and your mindset when you were accused of this, and obviously there were so many people around you that banded together too, but your specific mindset that got you through, that kept your nose clean while you were in prison, while you were serving, this sentence of a crime that you didn't commit, seemed to be you had this kind of resilience, and you were accused at 17 years old. So I mean, we're talking about a very, very young, mind at that point. What was it about your family dynamic that fostered that kind of mindset, that kindness, compassion, resilience that you seem to have?
I would have to say my mother. I mean, the kindness and the compassion and the patience that I feel like sometimes I surprise myself with in stressful situations comes from my mother. If anybody gets to know her or anybody knows her, she's a woman of faith. First and foremost, she's a woman of faith, and I think her faith and the things she's learned with her faith has brought her to be that type of human. And having a mother like that instilled that into me and her boys, I believe got me through some of the toughest times in my life. And going into this situation, with the resilience and the perseverance of not just the mental aspect of going through such a nightmare, but the physical aspect of continuing to look ahead in the future to understand that what's happening to me it doesn't have to necessarily make me into a bitter person. It doesn't necessarily have to make me into, what people expect me to become, which is an angry, bitter person who hates cops and hates judges and hates DAs. That's not who I am at all. I just know that we have a sin nature as human beings, and sometimes we can be a piece of crap. And there's some people out there that don't necessarily have right intentions, but it doesn't spoil the rest of them. And so I chose to understand that what's happening to me is evil, and I'm going to combat it with good. And so and here I am today. So we won.
Absolutely. Well, one more thing before we kind of start on that journey then. You obviously were very good at football, that, you were enjoying sports. Were there any other career aspirations that you were thinking about in high school age, or was it focused on college and maybe professional sports?
No, it was up in the air. I mean, at one point I was even thinking about being a firefighter. I was thinking about being a police officer. The idea of being a SWAT officer was something that was juggling in my head, and I just wanted to do something that was really cool and fun, and I was thinking about, being definitely a football player. I wanted to see where that went, and the professional side, of course. I mean, that's every college football player's aspiration, is to get to the next level. But it was just up in the air. I mean, I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do yet.
Beautiful. Well, that would have been a good profession too.
Yeah.
So prefacing the story, I had an absolute microdose of what, not so much you, but what your family went through. My son had a microdose of what you went through, just in the fact that he was in middle school as well. At school, basically there was some stuff going on. I'm divorced now, in his mother's house. There was kind of turmoil there. He was going through a kind of, low patch, was in a class one day, was kind of crying. The next thing, without communicating with me at all, he was put in a psych facility for 3 days. Saying, basically they took his interpretation of being sad into he's going to shoot up the school, which was a complete disregard from any of the protocols the school has. And this was basically a law enforcement officer that made this decision. So this whole project is dedicated to kindness, compassion, getting people out of pain, trying to keep people, from going down a path that ends up taking their life. That's what this is about. And I tell the stories of great police officers, tell the stories of great firefighters, but I also importantly tell the stories of the shitty ones, because those are the ones, their one complacency or arrogance or whatever it is leads to people losing their lives, losing their freedom, and even children, because I witnessed other children cycle through this facility while we were there as well. So, like I said, an absolute microdose, but knowing just how 3 days tore me up as a parent, I can't imagine, the pain that your family went through, what Gabriel went through, and obviously what you went through. So I just want to preface that with this conversation, this is an important conversation for two reasons. One, to highlight the impact one shitty decision could make on a person, an entire microcosm of someone. But also, this ends well. But there are so many people in prison right now that didn't have what we're going to see, though, that tribe that banded around them, that are still in prison. And the Innocence Project sends me texts every day of all these different people that they're fighting for. So with you're a successful high school athlete. You're with your middle school sweetheart. Your aspirations of maybe even one day entering one of our professions. Your mother is fighting a tumor. Your father's had a stroke. So they want to keep you at school. So you end up staying with a friend, Jonathan McCarty. And as you mentioned, in that house, there was a daycare. So lead me through the kind of the building up to that, what it was like initially in the house, and then obviously we'll get to the outcry and then move on from there.
Okay. Yeah. Of course, my parents, my sophomore year, the end of my sophomore year in high school, my parents suffered from two medical conditions. My mom developed brain tumors, and my dad had a bad stroke, a very severe stroke. And these both happened within the same month of each other. I had not been driving yet. I didn't have a car. I didn't have a license. I was just playing football, going to school. And my dad was taking me every morning. And we lived out in the country, so I was about maybe 20, 25 minutes away from the school. So, I had no way to get to school. And, I was obligated to get to school because I was a football player and needed to watch film and needed to work out before school time, And so a buddy of mine, Jonathan McCarty, he was like my backup in football. We were also friends too. We've been friends since middle school. And his house was an in-home daycare, and his mother was very welcoming to the athletes in the Leander area to come in, and hang out, play Xbox and eat pizza rolls and do that type of thing, and she was just real welcoming. And so that's how I knew of her and the house and Jonathan. And so when Jonathan offered, hey, come stay at my house until your parents get better so you can be closer to the school, it's 5 minutes away, it was something to consider. And so I then, talked to Shama and his mother, and she welcomed me in. And I told my parents, and I told my mom and my dad, and they agreed to it. And so I started living there. And so while I was living there, of course, I was closer to school, and I was able to play football and go to school and do that sort of thing and continue with my football career to go to college. But it was weird because when I lived there, I just started seeing another side of Jonathan that I didn't expect, not the side that I knew him of whenever I wasn't living with him. He was actually going down a pretty bad path. A few months in, he started using drugs, and he started bringing people to the house that I wasn't comfortable being around with what I wanted to do in my future. And he started bringing people to the house that his parents weren't comfortable with. And it was a few months in where Jonathan, I remember this morning where I was getting ready to go to school. And of course, I was able to use one of the family cars to get to school and go to work. And so, but one of the obligations, the stipulations to that is I had to take Jonathan to school, and take him wherever he needed to go, if he needed to go somewhere. And I said, cool. So we were getting ready to go to school, and I was getting my backpack, and I actually remember walking down the stairs one time, and there was a big altercation, and Shama, his mother, was yelling at him, and she was holding a backpack, and in the backpack was a big Ziploc bag of marijuana. And so, he was a 16-year-old kid with about, half a pound of marijuana. And so I was like, man, what's going on? He's actually selling it. He's become a drug dealer now. And so that's just not the Jonathan that I knew when I moved in, and I think that was a product of the people he started bringing over to the house, which were local drug dealers. And he got in trouble for it. But that was the start. And I say that story because that was the start where I started feeling uncomfortable living in that house. A few weeks later, he got caught with Xanax pills. He got caught with Molly. He got caught with just harder drugs. And it got to a point where I just started feeling so uncomfortable, even though I cared for Shama and his father, Ralph, very, very nice people. I just didn't want to live in that house anymore. I actually, my mom was on the urge of getting better. She had surgery. Her tumors were shrinking. It was a successful surgery. And so my dad was still going through rehab, and he was not getting better. He would have to stay through rehab. And so, but my mom was able to go back home about 8 months in to me living in that house. This was now going towards the end of my junior year. And I remember going to my mom and said, Mom, I want to come back home. I don't feel comfortable here anymore. I'm going to college next year. And she said, come home. And I come back home, and I've been home for about a month. And now it's already summertime, and during the summer, the high school holds this summer strength and conditioning camp where all the athletes have an opportunity to continue to work out at the high school and do drills over the summer. And I was getting out of that camp around 8 a.m. or actually 10 a.m. And I had a bunch of phone calls. This was already a month after I moved out of the house. I was living with my parents. I had my own car at the time. And I got out and I checked my phone, and I got a bunch of missed calls from my brother Marlon. And he says, call me immediately on a text message. So I call him, and he immediately says, hey, where are you? If you're coming to Shama's, don't come to Shama's. And I remember telling him, I was like, hey, I haven't been there in a month. What's going on? And he said, well, there's a father of one of the kids here stating that you sexually abused him. And like I always say, I thought my brother was joking with me when he first said that. I couldn't believe him. That's just something you don't expect to hear, or be joked about. It was terrible when he told me. I was like, man, quit joking with me. But I realized he wasn't joking. Things got really serious, and I remember my heart just sinking down to my stomach because this accusation has now just become real. I'm being accused of this. But the thing is, there was a huge question mark on my head because I didn't know what was going on. And I remember telling him, I want to come over to the house. I want to get down to the bottom of this. I want to know why I'm being accused of this. And he said, it's not a good idea, man. They're really mad, and just go home. And I'll figure it out. I'll see what's going on. I'll see why, you're being accused of it and why they're saying your name. And things went on, and we figured out that the kid said that Greg did this to him. And I was stuck in such a hopeless situation because I wanted to figure out why I was being accused of this. And I just wasn't getting answers. So for 3 weeks, I sat there. I couldn't communicate with the accuser. The accuser's a child, and I couldn't communicate with his father because my brother wasn't allowing me to. And I was also being recommended at that time. By that time, I had an attorney because these accusations that were being put on me were actually real. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I then told my attorney, and my attorney said, just, we'll see how it plays out. And it took 3 weeks for the victim's parents to finally go to the police. And I thought that was actually pretty strange. I sat there. I thought that was really strange. And so sitting at my mother's house, my mom's like, I remember telling my mom the same day I was getting accused, and I was scared to tell my mom because she was already emotionally unbalanced, but I had to tell her and keep her in the loop of what's going on. But for 3 weeks, man, I sat there just completely on the edge, didn't know what was going to happen. And during that 3 weeks, I had to continue to go work out and go live normal life while this accusation was being floated around in the air, and I was just trying to get down to the bottom of it. But then they go to the police, and I remember my attorney telling me that they went to the police, and the police officer and my attorney are communicating with each other, and about 2 weeks after they went to the police, almost about a little bit over a month now that I've been accused, out of nowhere, I remember getting a call from my attorney. This was in the middle of summer, and she said that there's a warrant out for your arrest. And I mean, now I can't even remember the feelings I felt then. I remember going and sitting in her office, and I just had a bunch of questions for her. I said, why am I being arrested for this? What do I do? Are they going to come and handcuff me? Like what? And she said, this child accused you, and that's all they need to arrest you. And that's not right. That's not right. Why wasn't there an investigation? Why can't we get down to the truth before they go and smear my name into the whole world without an investigation, without an opportunity to prove that I didn't do it? And she said, that's just how the system works. And that absolutely sickened me, as the person, as the victim, in this situation, and the child's still a victim. But at the same time, when you go and target somebody and you go get the wrong guy, they become a victim. And like you said, there's consequences to that. And the next, 3 to 6 years of my life were consequences to that. And I remember my attorney advising me at that moment to go and turn myself in, or they would come and handcuff me at practice or at school or at work, because I was working at the time. And I told her, I said, I can't do it. I said, I can't go in there. Does that mean that I'm going to say to the world that I did it? Because I didn't do it. She said, it doesn't mean that you did it, Greg. It's just showing that you're going to go in there, and it's already done. They're going to come. The warrant's already issued. I didn't know anything about anything. I didn't know the judicial system. I didn't know the justice system, how it worked. And what's crazy and the funny thing is that whenever I was looking for an attorney after I was being accused, before I went to Patricia Cummings, I didn't even know where to get an attorney. I didn't know where to find them. I didn't live a life where I needed an attorney. And so I turned myself in that terrible morning, and I spent 16 hours, man, in booking. 16 hours just sitting there. And I remember in booking, about 8 hours in, I was sitting on the bench. I was watching TV, waiting for my family to be able to gather up the money that it would take, which was $5,000 cash, to bond me out. It was a $50,000 bond. And I remember sitting in there waiting, and I called my mom like 4 times, and I just told her, get me out of here. Get me out of here. And about 8 hours in, there's already news reports on the TV about, Leander High School, Central Texas football star, getting arrested of aggravated sexual assault of a child. And, I was looking at that, and I just felt like, and I was a huge laughing stock of the whole county, that I was just I couldn't help it. I was in a helpless situation where sitting there and all these lies being made about me and this crap being thrown on my name. And then now I'm expecting, like, man, what's going to happen next with my scholarships? And I'm completely scared. I don't know what to expect next. And I was more so worried about that than all the other people around me looking at the same TV screen that I'm looking at. And they're looking at me like, holy crap, you're the guy that's on the TV. And then they put me in a holding cell by myself while the news was happening. I mean, they didn't even change the channel. The police officers didn't even change the channel. And so 16 hours later, I got bonded out. And then it was after that, it was led to me being expelled out of the school district, for one. My scholarships being stripped from me. I was all over every major news network in Central Texas as being painted a monster. And life seemed like it was over. I felt like I was in Groundhog Day, just reliving a nightmare every morning I woke up. And I got to a point, man, where I just didn't want to get out of bed anymore. It was the toughest situation because I didn't know how to handle it, and if it wasn't for, specifically that time, if it wasn't for my now wife, Gabriel, telling me she believes in me and we're going to fight, and all these other people, like my family, gathering around me to support me, then I don't know if I would have been here today talking to you. I mean, honestly, it was so tough. And so, but when you thought that it couldn't get any worse, it did. 1 month later, after being released, going to an alternative school, I was in juvie. They sent me to juvie. They kicked me out of the district. I had to wear a military uniform because I was in a military-based little boot camp thing. And 1 month later, I remember getting a call from my attorney stating that there's another accusation about me. And dude, I mean, now it felt like this was just a huge, big misunderstanding, or something's being made up, or somebody's being coached, or somebody's targeting me. There's somebody who really doesn't like me out there, because I just couldn't understand it. And I said, well, what's going on now? And they're saying there's a separate kid saying that you did it. And I was like, but I didn't do it. I didn't do anything. And now she's telling me that I got to now turn myself in again. And this was like the day before, I was going to school, and I was actually in school. I had to report to school, and I was, telling my family that I needed to, the situation that I'm going through. And I actually got arrested in class, at the alternative school that I was at. They came and handcuffed me in class. They slapped handcuffs on me in front of everybody, and took me away to the Williamson County Jail for the second time, and went through everything that I went through the first time. I'm on the news again, 16 hours in booking, had to pay more money now to get me out. And then after that, after I got out, I was demanding answers. I was so broken. I told my attorney, I remember telling my attorney, I said, we need to get down to the bottom of this, and you need to go to work for me. Like, you need to literally figure this out, and you need to go prove to them that I didn't do it. And, then it led to a 1-year waiting game, of nothing, of literally nothing. Like, there was no findings. There's no advancement in the case. Like, I kept asking my attorney, Patricia Cummings, what's next? What's next? You know, that has it been resolved yet? Did they, if they did get assaulted, did they get the right guy, or did they figure out that it was all a big made up lie? What's going on? To give me answers. But there was no answers. There's nothing. And it came to a time where it's about approaching the summer of 2014, and Patricia calls me and saying that I'm getting indicted by a Williamson County grand jury. And what it means to be indicted is that you're about to go to trial. The prosecution has persuaded these people to allow them to go to trial, and potentially their goal is to convict you of this crime. And so I told Patricia, what's next? What are we doing next? Like, I don't want to go to, I don't need to go to trial. They need to continue to figure this out. They need to figure this out. Who did it? And, of course, no answers. And she ended up telling me we have to go to trial. And it just didn't seem real, man. Like, the nightmare got worse. The nightmare got worse. Now I'm actually, the reality of me going to prison has now become real. And, what can I do? I mean, I already felt like my life was out of my control. Like, it honestly did not feel like I was in America. It did not feel like I was in the land of the free, that I was not an American citizen. I literally felt like I was in a communist country. Like, everything was out of my control. And, just a nightmare. And we ended up going to trial. Long story short, ended up going to trial. The trial lasted like 7 days. And before trial, this is a thing a lot of people talk about and ask about, because it just shows you what type of circus act that Williamson County tried to pull in this situation. It shows you what type of justice system we have, and we allowed to have, here in America, that somebody who's being accused of super aggravated sexual assault of a child, so much so that the DA's office is so convinced that he did it, that he's willing to sit him and his family down in a room, send his own attorney into a room with him before they go and get a grand jury, and offer him a plea deal to 5 years probation and a certain amount of fines, a certain amount of days in jail, a lifetime sex registration, to a crime that is 25 to 99 years every day, day for day, no parole. The most frowned upon crime in humanity. It's worse than murder in some cases. I mean, you last longer as a murderer in prison than you do a child molester. And so at that point, man, sitting there with my attorney, I was so angry that I wanted to go and tell them they can go and shove that 5 years up, where. I mean, that's stupid, That's so disrespectful. I mean, you're trying to ruin my life. And you say, hey, man, you can get out of it, though. Take this 5 years. We believe you did it. Now, if you really believe I did it, what kind of justice is that to a victim that you believe was sexually assaulted? Like, I get it. If you're stupid enough to go and if you're evil enough to go ruin my life, then I guess, you don't care enough to go and actually seek justice for victims that were actually sexually assaulted. And that's the kind of America that we live in. And now, man, sitting there with my mom in that room the day before my trial, before my grand jury, I was sitting there, and my attorney comes in and tells me what the DA wants to do. And of course, the crazy thing is that I was so scared. I was so scared to go to trial that in a county that was targeting me, not only in a county that has a historical history of wrongfully convicting people, like the Michael Morton case and a few other cases, and 98% conviction rate. I mean, they're sending people to prison for marijuana charges in Williamson County. And so I remember looking at my mom. The crazy thing is that I was actually thinking about it. I was thinking about it. I was thinking about looking at my broken mother crying, completely afraid, telling me, I'm afraid that they're going to take you away, Greg. I'm afraid. And seeing her looking at me almost makes you want to do it,
Take the plea deal, you mean?
Yeah, almost makes you want to take the plea deal. And I remember calling Gabrielle. She's in LA at the time. Oh, not in LA. She was actually doing something that didn't require her going there, but being there. But and she, out of nowhere, man, just became a fighter, more of a fighter than I was at the time. She kind of kicked my butt into gear, and she said, "We're going to continue to fight for this. I know what you're feeling right now, but you're going to be free. Like, this is going to get cleared up." Now, she believed more than I did at the time because, she's such a strong person. But I ended up saying no. I ended up saying, I'm going to trial and I'm fighting for my life. And I go to trial. 1 week of just tough trial, man. Felt like a lot of the time was going good. And the reason why I was going good is because there was absolutely nothing to tie me to this case. It was what it was. It was a 1 week of just trying to paint a picture of, every attempt to prove Greg didn't do this, but you didn't have the evidence. It was really just a big debate and persuasive game. A lot of hypothetical situations, this and that. And at the end of it, man, we sat there, and it was about the 6th day of the trial, and the jury went off. And to kind of, so much stuff has happened. It's hard for me to think back on.
No, take your time, mate.
But during the trial, one of the key things that really just stood out to a lot of people was, I was saying earlier that I was accused of one kid, and then a month later I was accused of another because another kid apparently gave an outcry. Another kid actually apparently came forward and told his parents that I sexually assaulted him, but that wasn't the case. Actually, the kid never came forward and told his parents that I sexually assaulted him. What happened was that we found out in trial that the detective, after I was accused of the first kid and arrested, that same detective brought it upon himself to go and call specific people in the daycare, specific parents, and tell them immediately that, this guy has been sexually assaulting kids in a daycare, and we want to make sure that your kid was not sexually assaulted. And he then brings this kid made no outcry to his parents, then brings this kid to the Children's Advocacy Center, which is a center, of course, where kids sit down and get interviewed by trained professionals to give outcries, forensic interviewers to give outcries and accounts for anything that has been done to them, sexually, physically, emotionally. And the interviewer's interviewing that second kid, right? And the kid's saying nothing. The kid is just acting normal, not giving an outcry, not saying anything happened to him. And then the detective in trial, we showed this, but the detective walks in, with a gun on his hip. He's not even in a uniform, and tells the forensic interviewer to get out of the room. He's going to take it from here. And he starts interviewing, and I say interviewing lightly. He starts interrogating this kid, asking him leading questions and telling him, "You're going to tell me what your mother said. You're going so I heard, what did Greg make you do? Did Greg make you put lotion on his penis? Yes or no?"
And this is a child that has no concept of being abused at all, and now a police officer is introducing all these sexual images to a perfectly innocent child.
Correct. And sitting there, the kid is saying no. That's the crazy part, is the kid is actually understanding what the police officer is saying, and the kid is saying no. And finally, basic psychology would, you can see it if you have your own child, but if, a kid says no multiple times and it's not what you want to hear, he's noticing it's not what you want to hear. He's going to eventually say the opposite, which is yes, to please you, to get out of a stressful, uncomfortable situation. And that's what happened in this video. Was the kid said, okay, no's not the correct answer. I should probably say yes. And said yes, and it was a wrap. The police officer said, all right, we're done here. And then this is another crazy part that we found out post-trial in innocence hearing. We'll get to later on, but he then gathered that information, that second outcry, and goes to a judge that same day. Goes to a judge. At the time, she was an assistant district attorney, but she is now a judge. But goes to her and asks for advice if this is enough to get a second arrest warrant for Greg Kelley. And she saw it, and she said she advises him not to do it. This is incorrect. This is not good policing. This is not good investigation. This is not right. And he ends up doing it anyways. So now going to the trial back in July of 2014, the second kid in trial gets on stand, and all of the kids, that both of the kids interviews and testimonies were done by closed circuit television in a whole another courtroom. And we thought that was strange, because that actually did not provide a situation where the kids could actually properly identify me as the person who did this to them. And that, we come to realize, is a key component in actually finding the right guy, because that issue actually was brought up later on and became one of the key staples to what went wrong in this case.
Everything went wrong in this case.
Yeah, exactly. Everything went wrong, but identification, out of all cases, this is probably one of the biggest ones, because during description of the assailant is one thing. The description of the assailant is one thing, but one thing that the police officer did not do in this whole situation, from initial outcry of the first child to trial, one thing he didn't do, and if you watch enough Law and Order and CSI, you can even figure out that what you do whenever a kid seems confused is you put pictures in front of him and you point and you say, hey, who did this to you?
Who is Greg? Show me Greg.
Who is Greg?
Exactly.
Never did that.
Because I could call myself Greg and go and rob a bank and say, oh, Greg did it.
Yeah. And who is Greg? And so that never happened. They automatically assumed Greg was me, when the description of Greg didn't fit me at all. The place that the kid was saying that this happened was not my room, was not the description of my room. It was Jonathan's room.
Yeah, and just for people, just to put this in right now, so for people listening that haven't seen Outcry, and as you mentioned, it's a very important thing, all the interviews are video. They're all there. So this is not like third-hand information. You as a viewer get to see each of these interrogations, each of these interviews, each of these outcries. But Jonathan McCarty and you at that time looked almost identical.
Yeah. So to touch on that, Jonathan and I mean, we were really good friends, and he was younger than me. He was 1 year younger than me, but a lot of people always thought that he was my little brother. I mean, everybody was like, "Oh, is that your little brother? Man, y'all look alike," you know? And I mean, being his really good friend, I mean, it was pretty cool being kind of like his older brother, you know? And I'm the youngest. I didn't have a younger brother, so it was cool having that, you know? But, yeah, I mean, now that, transcended into this, it was like, man, that's crazy that I look back on it, and a lot of people thought we were brothers because we look so much alike. And, I didn't think much of it until, I was accused, and the description of what the first child is saying is matching Jonathan, what he was wearing, his room, and his vocabulary, Jonathan used a certain word that the kid said that the assailant said, which was boss. And Jonathan would tell the kids that, he was the boss in the house. And so kind of ending my trial, the second kid actually gets on stand, and everything that he was forced to say in the interview at the Children's Advocacy Center, he actually recanted on stand and said nothing happened to him.
Which I thought was incredible as well. I mean, firstly, the kid was swayed, but secondly, that child and obviously that family, because at one point the parents must have been like, oh, maybe my kid was, molested. But for that family unit to be like, no, this didn't happen. We trust our child, and we're not going to stand up there and falsely accuse someone of something that, as you said, was basically solicited.
Yeah. No, I think it was very insightful for a lot of people. I mean, it provided, if I felt any type of justice in the process I was going through in trial, I was so happy that the truth was coming out, with the second kid recanting, and I gave me a little bit of sigh of relief, but the first kid, he was so brainwashed and so coaching that I did this to him because you got to know that for a whole year leading up to a trial, when the police officer should have been doing an investigation, record has actually proved that this kid was going to a therapist every other day, reliving what happened to him by a therapist asking him, hey, how's it going? How are you taking, that stuff that happened with Greg? And this just kind of putting that in his head every day up until the trial. And that's a brainwashing technique. That's a technique to make up something. I'm not saying that this accusation was made up, but it's a technique to put something into this kid's head and make it stick, because that this kid is at an age where, imagination is everything to him. And multiple psychologists, it's a learning point for forensic psychology and, child psychology, that if you're going to be a forensic interviewer, if you're going to be involved with child psychology, it is probably the most important psychology, because you have the ability to either inspire a kid or completely ruin his life from here on out.
Well, they had that one moment where they talked about one of the studies that was in the 70s or 80s, and they videoed a physician doing a pediatric wellness check, basically, and then they did a lot of that suggestive interviewing So they asked the first time, what happened? Did they touch you anywhere? No, they just measured my arm, took my blood pressure, listened to my heart. And then they did some suggestive interviewing. The kid went away, came back, did interviewing again, and this time the story was completely warped. The doctor touched my pee-pee and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating, So, and then you look at some of the cases that they feature. You mentioned, where are we? Michael Morton, and being accused of murdering his wife. And then there's that one famous daycare, that was accused of satanic rituals, and that's it ended up being the same thing. So as myself, being very, very, uneducated in that world, it was horrific to watch how an adult can manipulate the mind of a child and basically orchestrate a completely false reality in that poor child's mind.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it was very insightful to a lot of people, and I was even in belief of this before this happened to me. But a lot of people, if I'm not naive to the comments and the Facebook posts and the social media of me being painted as a monster during this whole process. I mean, I saw it, I saw it. I couldn't escape it. But a lot of things that people said that I saw that was repeating itself was 4-year-olds don't lie. 4-year-olds can't lie. He's not just going to make this up. Greg did it. And I said, well, hold on a second. If you knew what I just learned, then you would understand that a child is susceptible to being coached. A child is susceptible to believing these false realities, and he can be brainwashed to believe situations that didn't really play out the way it did. And that's exactly what happened here. And there's a lot of studies that, like I said, if you're fascinated by it, and it was very insightful to me because it gave me hope to continue to fight too.
Well, just before we kind of move on, one thing I think that gets lost when they're like, like you said, believe the child, is I think, everyone would agree that we believe that poor child was abused. It seems like. Yeah. But while you accuse and chase the wrong person, the person who did it is out there to continue their predatory ways. So if you get so focused on, oh, no, the child's completely right, then you're completely ignoring the fact that if you are wrong, which has happened in so many cases, and even, like I said, the Michael Morton, where they found some guy that had killed other people too, that other person is free to kill, to rape, to abuse, to whatever it is. So that is a huge, I think, takeaway from this, is that if you get too myopic in your investigation, you completely negate the possibility of a repeat. And obviously we'll get to that, where that was exactly the case here too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing. That's tunnel vision, 100%. When you get tunnel vision and you want to fully focus and target one person that you have come to believe. I don't know if he believed I did it or not. I don't know to this day if he believes I did it or not. But I know one thing is that he completely targeted me to be the person and only person through his actions and his investigation to not interview, investigate, or look for somebody else that was constantly and actually lived in that house at the time. I don't know if he knew that I moved out a month prior to this accusation coming about. I didn't know if he knew that or not, because, and what makes me believe that is we found out that he never actually went to the detective, Chris Daly, for the Cedar Park Police Department, never actually went to the house to do an investigation, didn't take pictures, didn't interview anybody living in that house, didn't do the basic necessities that it takes to be a law enforcement officer, to be a detective. Like I said, I don't know anything. I didn't get a degree in criminal justice, but I know enough to go to the freaking crime scene.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's a very important thing to stay on just for a moment. So was, because Jonathan had brothers as well, didn't he? That had also been in trouble with the law. And I'm not saying any of them were responsible in any way, shape or form. Was his dad living in the house too?
He was, yeah.
Okay. So you've got multiple males. Even if you've got the age description, whatever, you've got multiple males. It seemed like, it was a firm he that did this, and they didn't visit the residence. He didn't interview any of these other people. So, I mean, I'm a firefighter. I have no idea about the world of law enforcement other than the few kind of interactions that I have. But I think everyone can agree that policing 101 is that you eliminate suspects by interviewing, by, taking photos and descriptions. And, if it was done next to a tree, then it probably wasn't in the house. You know what I mean? So you figure out the location too. The fact that they took this poor little boy's word for the name Greg without identifying faces, without eliminating other people in the house and I think people, all the way up through the judicial ladder said the same thing. One of the worst example of policing they'd ever seen.
Absolutely. And the crazy part is that the accusation was that Greg did this to me. It wasn't Greg Kelley. It wasn't Greg, who's 6'1", tan skin, football player that wears this clothes. No, it was Greg that did this to me. And he was wearing this, which was SpongeBob pajama pants. It was in this place, this room with the trophies, right? And the descriptions of Greg actually matched Jonathan. So, like I said, Detective 101, if I didn't need to go to college to be a detective, but if the description is not matching the name, then I'm going to now look at all the possible suspects in the house to find who Greg is to this child. And so, and touch on a little bit of what you said earlier about, man, like the repercussions and the consequences that happen to not going and getting the right guy. I mean, if you watch Outcry, other people got raped, drugged and raped by this guy. I mean, it's a perfect storm. When you don't seek justice the first time, not only do you ruin somebody's life, but more people's life gets ruined. And it's all at the cost of getting that notch on your belt and sustaining the conviction rate of a 98% conviction rate in Williamson County.
Yeah.
That's why.
Well, you had the second Outcry was revoked. So I'm assuming then you got off scot-free and then you went on to live happily ever after.
Not at all, man. Not at all. I wish, man. Actually, you know what? I don't know, man, because, looking back at it, as crazy as it sounds, if you just imagine it for a second. I went to trial, 7 days, fought like hell, but would I be innocent? You know what I mean? Or would I be classified as O.J. Simpson? That's something that I think of every day, is that I got accused of all this, but the DA and the police officers, man, painted me to be a complete monster and persuade the court of public opinion to put in doubt. You know what I mean? To completely put this big ass crap mark on my name. And if I went to trial and got proven not guilty, you still got to also, take in the fact that I wouldn't have been innocent. And I guess you could say, I put that in quotations because in today's law, in American law, is that when you go to trial and you get not guilty, it's not the same thing as being innocent. I mean, I would have went off to college, and who knows? I mean, I would have ran into somebody that said, you know what, you're that guy that may or may not have done it, But now I can declare to the world that I am actually innocent, and I had 9 judges tell me that I was actually innocent. I fought like hell and proved that I didn't do this. And I've been exonerated. I've exonerated myself from these charges. My record has been cleared. And so looking back at it, I mean, it's crazy to say, do I wish that I was deemed not guilty at trial? I mean, I can't answer that, dude. I mean, I don't know what my life would have been if I walked away from that courtroom that day. It's a tough paradigm, man. Tough thing to think about. And so, I'm completely blessed now. I mean, I have a wonderful life, wonderful wife. I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm so excited about it that I can't hold it in. But no, man. I mean, I got convicted in July 2014 of super aggravated sexual assault of a child. And now what happened after the trial, going into the sentencing phase, is something that a lot of people need to know, because it again paints an image of our judicial system and how it works. A lot of people don't know this because it's not sexy for Hollywood to put this into Law and Order or CSI. But when you go into a sentencing phase, after you're deemed guilty, I mean, your hand tied behind your back, you're handcuffed. I mean, you're going to prison no matter what. Something's happening. You're getting sentenced to something. I just got wrongfully convicted, and I had to spend a night in jail. And the very next day, I get put into a room with my family before the sentencing phase. I have to walk right back out to everybody who just witnessed me getting convicted, and sit there and figure out the fate of the rest of my life. And I'm sitting in that room, this little separate room with my family before I get pulled out to the sentencing hearing. And my attorney walks in, and she tells me that the judge, before we go out there, I want to tell you something, but the judge and the DA has come to an agreement that if you accept the minimum of 25 years without parole, then, and you have to waive your right to appeal this trial. That's the catch. You got to waive your right to appeal this trial. Then you will get the minimum of 25 years. And then she specifically, this is how she said it, word for word. I will never forget this. She told me, or Greg, you can go out to the same jury that convicted you and get anywhere between 25 to 99. Now, talk about a play on words, dude. Talk about a play on words. I mean, get put in that situation and be told that. You know what I mean? Same jury that just convicted you, and they can give you any number between 25 to 99 without parole. I mean, just jury.
And this is the prosecutor. I'm sorry, but just to say, so this is your lawyer who also hadn't asked why no one had mentioned the fact that you guys looked together, who also hadn't asked why wasn't the house investigated. I mean, all these areas. So after the fact, we realized that, she as a defense lawyer had dropped the ball in so many areas as well. And again, appeared to just want to close this case and move on with her life.
Yeah, it got to that point for her. After $50,000 that we paid her, sold my house. I mean, my mom sold the house that I grew up in to pay for her 20-something years of memories, gone to fight for my life and pay for this woman to fight for my life, gone. And she just wants to close it up and move on. And yeah, man, she told me that, and I, again, caught in a situation, caught in this decision that I don't want to make anymore. I specifically remember telling my family that I don't want to make decisions anymore. You decide for me. Because apparently I'm not making the right ones anymore. Like, crap, I'm at this situation where I just feel like everything's out of my control. And I'm scared to make the next decision. And I tell my brother, I said, man, choose for me. I said, get out at 44 years old or spend the rest of my life and die in prison. And and the crazy part is Patricia nonchalantly said, we don't have much time to decide this. Yeah, we got like 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Because she's got to get to Starbucks.
Yeah, 5 minutes, man. And man, we ended up deciding that I would, for the sake of me getting out and seeing my family again and tasting freedom in this lifetime, I would get out at 44.
For a crime you didn't commit.
For a crime I didn't commit. Talk about just living a nightmare. I mean, just imagine being in a nightmare like that, man. And you can't wake up. You can't wake up. It's real. And so, I go out there and I get sentenced to 25 years. I got to sign a paper, and I wave to my family goodbye, and I blow a kiss because I thank them so much. Sorry, man, I'm getting emotional. I just thank them so much. Man, I probably told this story 1,000 times. But I thank them so much. I get sent off to prison for 25 years. Yeah.
Well, don't apologize for getting emotional, man. I can't, I mean, I say I can't imagine. Like I told you, I had that microcosm of my 12-year-old child being locked away in a room where they took his shoelaces and completely at the completely the cause of horrendous policing. So I have that minute kind of version of it. What I really want to ask, and it wasn't something that, was really expanded on in the documentary, is anyone who kind of knows street level, the worst thing you could possibly be in prison is probably a law enforcement officer and or a pedophile, accused pedophile. Definitely. So you're there now, you go into prison, innocent of your crime, but you're not going there as an armed robber or someone who beat up a cop or anything that might be admired in prison. You're going in as a sex offender. So yeah. What was that like? I don't mean like, oh, that must have been really hard. I mean, like, seriously, how hard was it to A, stay alive, and B, not then create a situation where you're accused of something that actually would be a crime and now complicates the whole issue?
Yeah, man. Going into prison, like I said this before in different interviews, but dude, it's going into prison as a child molester. You don't last years. The life expectancy is not years. It's days. They don't want you there. You're the scum of the earth. You don't deserve to take another breath. And I think all of us who care about children and love children and maybe have a child, deep down on some level, we agree, right? But being painted as that, man, when you're not, and you just want to go play football and have a girlfriend and go to college and just go live a normal life, being painted that, going into an environment which is a world inside of a world. Prison is not what we think it is. You know what I mean? On some halfway level, it's what you see on movies, but prison in itself is a tricky place, man, to be as a child molester, because every day you gotta watch your back. You gotta see what you do, and you gotta see where you go, and you gotta see what you say, and how you conduct yourself will determine ultimately your fate in prison. And what I mean by that is I had to become the most adherent to my surroundings as possible to make it through that place. I had to figure out who not to become friends with, who not to talk to, where to go, what to do. And, did I run into challenges? I did. Did I have to defend myself? I did. Am I absolutely blessed not to be killed and stabbed and scarred, and maimed for life? I'm blessed that I because I've witnessed so much of that, in there. I've witnessed people's life being taken from them because of what they've done. And that could have been me, But for some reason, man, there was a hedge of protection over me where that didn't happen to me. And that's where my faith comes in. That's where I believe that there was a higher power looking over me, man. And, I mean, how do you equip an 18-year-old, man, to go into that environment? How do you do that? And, I am absolutely blessed and lucky that I was able to get through that, because 99% of people don't. If that's either being killed, committing suicide, a lot of that too, or finally getting released, but you're really not free. You know what I mean? Like, that place has messed you up so much, emotionally, mentally, where you're now back in freedom, but it's just you're too scarred. And for 3 years, I had to fight the mental warfare that was going on in my head, the physical warfare, the spiritual warfare. And each and every day I had to get up out of bed. And this is where the next thing I'm going to say is something that I had to do each and every day. I had to make the choice to keep living. You know what I mean? Because I could have easily just started existing. I could have easily just started going through the motions and just, existed until my demise, until I died, But I chose every day to continue to better myself and put myself into situations where I could be the most successful in the circumstances that I was going through. I put myself through college in prison. I put myself on a unit that gave you the opportunities to go to college. I put myself on a unit where I could work and learn trades, which the trades I learned in prison, I created a business with out in the world. You know what I mean? I put myself through those, and I made a decision to continue to live life, and not give up. And I had a support group. I had a family. I had perfect strangers write me every day, reminding me of who I am, what's going to happen, and that I'm eventually going to be free. And that's what drove me, man. I mean, that's what kept me alive. The love of my wife kept me alive. It kept my heart beating. You know what I mean? My heart could have died, man. And I could have became a person, a totally different person that I came in. That place has so much hate that it could have made you into a person that you don't want to be around anymore. A person that makes a bunch of excuses, a person that is racist. I mean, there's so much racism in prison. I mean, color is everything in prison. And when you live in a world where color is everything, there's going to be a lot of dysfunction. And that's how it is in there. Your color determines your respect. And I thank God that I separated myself from that dogma. And I continue to fill myself up with things that are going to make me successful. And, going into the prison system at 18 years old, I just think back on it, man. There's a lot of situations where I will remember for the rest of my life that have shaped me into the person that I am today. Faith-wise, strength-wise, appreciating freedom, going without for so long that now that I have it, it's just like, man, dude, it's awesome to have it. Hopping in my truck and going to a park and walking my dog. Those are things that you daydream about in prison. You know what I mean? Being able to have dinner with my mom and sit down at a table and have dinner with my family. Those are things that you daydream about in prison. And those are situations that I will never take for granted for the rest of my life. And so that's where I'm at on it, man. I mean, for 3 years, it was a nightmare. And, yeah, man, a lot of fighting. I mean, if you watch the documentary, there was a lot of stuff that we had to jump and hurdles we had to jump and overcome. Yeah, man.
Yeah, well, thank you for that perspective, because I mean, it must have been horrendous. And I've had, people from corrections facilities in the US. I've had people from Norway, and I'm always kind of curious on, how we can do every element of life better, not throwing shit at the way people do it now, but it's like, there are places all over the planet that do things really well. Norway's prisons are actually excellent for rehabilitation, and their reoffender rate is extremely low. And you hear about the predatory, the racial element, the drugs within the prison, the fact that you're locked in a box, which is not exactly good for the human spirit. And I think last year this planet has had a little taste of an insight into what it must be like in prison, and they all hated it. So there we go. Clearly it's not a very rehabilitative, experience. One thing, you were talking to Kate, and I want to say thank you to Kate Casey for connecting us as well. I listened to your interview with her. You had the gentleman Jake Bryden kind of pop up out of nowhere and be one of the voices to petition for your innocence. Now, what was interesting to me is that when Kate asked how Jake came into your life, it involved Cabry's father. So I think that's a very important story to tell, that how you can be a mentor figure and a respected member of society, not from affluence or political stature, but as a human being, to the point where that can invoke trust on other people. So kind of tell me about that story, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. So Jake Bryden, I had no idea who he was. Jake became a very influential and essential voice in my story for fighting for my life. He came up out of nowhere, like three days after I was convicted. Right after I was convicted. He was just a normal guy who owned a business here in Central Texas area, and he was just at home, man, just watching the news, and he had heard about the Greg Kelley case and the things that were going on in it and how it was transpiring and stuff like that. So he saw like that dreadful day of me being convicted, and it was blasted all over the news. But when I was being convicted, he also saw his old leadership coach on the news standing next to Greg Kelley, supporting him, And Jake was so influenced by David Anderson, who is now my father-in-law, but he was so influenced by him and so impacted by him growing up through high school that Dave is the type of guy that will imprint on people, and people will remember him for the rest of their life. And so, Jake immediately called David and said, "Hey, what's going on with this Greg Kelley thing? I saw that you're supporting him, and he's dating your daughter." And I can't remember word for word the conversation that they had, but it was something along the line as David does support me, and he believes in me, and he told Jake that Greg didn't do it, and he's being targeted, and there was a big mishandling of justice that happened here, Jake, and Jake then was put in a situation where it was like, okay, this guy that I respect so much is standing up for this guy who's being painted as a monster. Something just doesn't seem right. Why would somebody do that? And so Jake went and did his own investigation and did his own searching and researching, and ended up calling, David back and was like, "Hey, I'm going to fight for Greg too. Something's in my soul that needs to fight for Greg." Just learning about the case and what Greg went through, I got to fight for him too. And Jake then calls my mom, my broken mother, just witnessed her son get torn away from her. My mom's crying, dude, at home. And Jake calls my mom, and actually Jake doesn't call my mom. He calls my brother Doug, and Doug runs into my mom's room and said, "Hey, Mom, this guy named Jake Bryden's on the phone. He wants to help Greg. And my mom just couldn't believe it, because for 3 days straight, she was fasting and praying for a miracle, for an angel to come and save my life. And that answered her prayer, man. I mean, Jake then that same day or the next day goes to Radio Shack, grabs a megaphone, pulls down his tailgate in the middle of the high school parking lot, and gets a rally going, gets a rally going, and starts just going at it, man. I mean, Jake, you know, we gave him a nickname called the Mouth of the South because his voice, I mean, the way he talks, I mean, he should be a public speaker. I mean, dude's phenomenal, but he got up and did, I believe, what no man would ever do for another man, which is stand up and fight for him when all the odds are against him. And you know, he didn't know me. He had no obligation to do that, but he did, and that then developed into continuing to fight for 3 years. Jake took to social media. He held rallies. You know, he fought like hell for me, and now to this day, you know, back in January of 2019. Or January 2020, Jake ended up marrying me and Gabriel, you know.
Officiating the marriage, not marrying both of you.
Yeah, right. He officiated.
Wasn't a weird three-way marriage.
Yeah, no three-way marriage, but officiated the marriage and you know, because it felt fitting, you know. And so, yeah, man, Jake, we like to believe sometimes, you know, Jake is an angel that came out of nowhere, man. But when I said in Outcry, when he starts opening up his mouth and to save my life, you can clearly he's not an angel.
So that's what starts unfolding. Is you have all these just terrible professionals. So whether it's, you know, the investigating officer, whether it's the sheriff, whether it's your defense attorney, you know, even there's the DA as well, I think, at the time. So there's all these, you know, figures of people that just have no ownership of their profession, but then don't have the courage and humility to say, you know what, we screwed up. Now we're going to take the time to review this case, undo the damage. It was just stand by your screw up. And, you know, my career and my ego is more important than this guy we just sent into prison for 25 years that may get stabbed in 2 days and, you know, never walk out again. But then, as I said, you have these amazing figures, you know, coming in. Obviously, Gabriel and her family stood by you, and you had Jake. But then another guy who I would actually love to get on the show as well was Keith Hampton. So Tell me about again how you found him, and then let's talk about the end of that initial 3-year physically being in prison.
Yeah, so Keith actually, after I was convicted, Keith was immediately recommended to me by Patricia Cummings, you know, the same attorney that was conflicted and ineffective. She requested her good friend Keith to represent me as my appeal attorney. And the process of me appealing my trial was completely waived. That was part of that 25 years, right? And so there was no hope to appeal what happened in the trial. So the only hope that we had was to find new evidence that would prove that I was innocent. And in some sense, it was a long waiting game, but we really didn't have to reach far for new evidence because these stones we turned over were right in front of us the whole time that the police department never wanted to turn over. I mean, simple things, man, as get my freaking phone and figure out where I was the day that the, you know, crime happened. I was 50 miles away. And so Keith got introduced through Patricia, and it was about 3 years of waiting. It was more so waiting for a court date. It was waiting to actually get in front of judges to fight and prove that I didn't do this, to show the evidence. And it was hard to do because we had to jump over the hurdle of the current DA's office. You know what I mean? While during that 3-year process of fighting after I was convicted, about 2 years of that, the same DA's office that convicted me was still in office and that would not want to see the new evidence that my attorney found that would prove that I didn't do this.
That would prove that they were wrong, because again, they don't want to be proven wrong. Because
they know they didn't do the investigation. They know that there's evidence out there that proves that I didn't do it. So of course they're going to shut down any attempt by my attorney to be proven wrong. So I remember my attorney telling me, and Jake telling me too, that just 2 months after I was convicted, Keith Hampton wanted to march into DA Janet Duty's office and say, hey, I got enough evidence to prove to you that Greg didn't do this. Just 2 months. And she just kind of, I don't know, maybe she was having a good day. She said, I'll have a meeting with you. And Keith couldn't even get to slide 6 on his PowerPoint before Janet Duty says, get out of my office. You know what I mean? Shuts it down and says, I don't care if you show me a video of somebody else doing it. Greg's not getting out of prison unless there was somebody else living in that house that looks like Greg. And you know, Keith was like, and he's like,
keep digging.
And his name was, you know, Gregory Raymond Kelley. Then we have nothing to talk about here. You know?
Mm-hmm.
And Keith was like, okay, I know what's happening here. I know the game you're playing. And so Keith then tells Jake, okay, we got to do this the hard way. And we ended up having to go through the courts, and we had to wait, man. We had to wait and wait and wait and wait. And when there was a perfectly capable DA's office to, you know, right a wrong. And in the process, in about 2 years, and that's the crazy thing about people that are crazy and people that, and it's sad. I mean, it's sad. I mean, you know, people that are crazy and people that do bad things in this life, they have to live with the decisions that they make. You know what I mean? And they have so many skeletons in their closet that 2 years later, while I was waiting in the court system to get a date, first of all, a new DA comes into town because Sean Dick wins the re-election. Before that, Judge Janet Duty ends up like getting charged with contempt of court and like a previous murder trial and this and that, and she's pretty much just making a fool of herself and ending her career, you know, showing herself to be unfit. And she ends up getting disbarred and has to do like 2 days in jail or something for her contempt in court. And then the DA's office position, the Williamson County DA's office, is completely vacant for somebody to take after re-election. And Sean Dick, district attorney out of, you know, Austin, Travis County, ends up winning the re-election. And the second day, man, while he was in office, he allowed Keith to come in and show what he has to prove that I'm innocent. And this was after, you know, we lost in the First Circuit Court, you know, in my case. Judge didn't want to see it. Judge didn't want to hear it, you know, and we were kind of losing hope. And out of nowhere, man, Sean Dick wanted to have a meeting with Keith Hampton and listen to what he has. This is the new DA of Williamson County.
And he seems like another good figure that comes in. And he wasn't, from, you know, obviously from the footage that we saw, it wasn't like, hey, I'm Sean, I'm totally pro Kelley, pro Greg, and we're going to get him out. He was very middle of the road, but he said, if there's a chance that this guy might be wrongfully convicted, why wouldn't I review the case? And that's all anyone wants. It's just a fair shot at a review. And that's what you asked for the 3 or 2 years prior, and you were just told to go away, which is just disgusting. So he seemed to me, as, you know, again, a viewer, to be a very middle of the road, fair man who is probably very, very good in the position that he sits in now.
Absolutely. You know, he's the type of guy that every county should have as a DA, was a guy who is simply just seeking the truth. You know what I mean? There's no reputation to withhold, right? I mean, there is no promotion like he's trying to be a judge. I mean, who knows? Maybe he does, but I know he's trying to earn it the right way with what he did.
That's the kind of judge that you want, though. A fair one.
Judge that you want, man. You want a fair judge that just seeks the truth. just getting down to the truth. And so going into it, man, Sean Dick sits down with my attorney, and just a few hours ends up getting out of the meeting and calls the Texas Rangers to get involved and reopen Greg Kelley's case. And I remember getting visited by a Texas Ranger in jail, in prison, and then a few short months later, I was bench warranted back to Williamson County, and this was the action that we've been praying and fighting for, was to get back to Williamson County, get an innocence of evidence hearing, to prove all the evidence and show all the evidence in a hearing that we gathered post-trial, and to get me home. And I was bench warranted back in June of 2017, and waited until like August of 2017 to have my hearing. And it was August 2nd, the hearing started. And it was a 3-day hearing. And it was just a bunch of, evidence being brought forward, proving that I was nowhere near the crime scene when it happened, through my phone, proving, it was a lot of things that were collected on Jonathan's laptop that showed a lot of images that would be classified as child pornography.
The fact that you weren't in the house the day that the accusation was made, things like that.
I was not in the house when the accusation was made. Jonathan was in the house when the accusation was made. Child pornography on his cell phone. Rumors of him, wearing the clothes. You know what I mean? Like, I guess you could say testimonies and eyewitness accounts of him wearing the clothes that the victim said the assailant wore while he was abused. And then also, what's really, really messed up is the victim was not actually in the courtroom and was able to testify, but Jonathan actually drugged and raped an underage girl in a different county. And that, like I said, that's an example of what happens when you don't put the right guy in prison. And so after really tough 3 days of, and this is in the same exact courtroom, man, not in the same county, not just in the same county, it's in the same county, but it's the exact same courtroom that my life was taken away from me. Different judge this time. And there's 12 courtrooms and I was in that one. That's crazy. And so sitting there at the end of it, I thought I was going to get released. I thought I was going to be on an appeal bond because that's what we were fighting for. It wasn't to prove I was innocent. I mean, there was no way to prove I was innocent right then and there because that has to be done at a higher court, which is the Court of Criminal Appeals. That's how it is in the state of Texas. They're actually trying to change that where, circuit courts, district judges can actually declare you innocent and exonerate you without having to go to the higher court to get approval. But that hearing was just simply to present the new evidence. First and foremost, the goal was to have the judge agree and to the claims that we were bringing forward. And secondary was to get an appeal bond to get me released while I waited for the process for the CCA, the Court of Criminal Appeals, the highest criminal court in the state of Texas, to make the ultimate decision of 3 decisions: getting exonerated, getting retried, or going back to prison. And, after 3 days of going through all that, man, not only was it hard for me to kind of rewatch the same detective be exposed of his wrongdoings and all the things he could have done, you know what I mean? And then what was really sickening was seeing him make every excuse in the world why he believed that he was acting in good faith. And it goes to show you, it's a testament, and a byproduct of his training and the leader in the department. And of course, if you watch the documentary, you kind of get a taste of, Sean Mannix, the chief of police in Cedar Park, the arrogance and how he conducts himself and how pretty much he thinks his crap doesn't stink. And, that was the guy he was taught by. And so on some level, I expect, somebody who's trying to make stupid look smart. And like, that's ultimately what happened, man, is there was a lot of I don't recalls and I don't knows. When you have that, dude, you don't deserve to wear a badge.
Well, and it's something I talk about a lot on here, because that's exactly it. If you don't hold the bar when you hire people, and then you don't hold the bar within that department at ranks, year by year, whether it's training wise, whether it's physical fitness wise, whatever it is, that's what terrifies me. In the last place I worked, there was an element of that. We were in fire, not law enforcement. So it wouldn't be that someone would be wrongfully convicted. It would be that someone would die. They would die in a fire, die in, a mass shooting, whatever it was, because that complacency was allowed to foster from the up, the top down. So this is such an important thing for people to see. And I encourage everyone to watch Outcry, but this is exactly it. What happened to you is what I talk about so often. If we don't hold ourselves accountable individually and as a department, people die. Children go to psych facilities that shouldn't go. High school kids end up in prison. And, again, just to underline, this story, which we're going to wrap up in a second, so I know you got to go in a moment, has a happy ending somewhat, apart from obviously you carry what happened with you. But there are so many people that didn't have that, group that are still in prison now or are dead. Like some of the people I've had on the show. There's one gentleman whose son Drew, passed because of a really, really shitty paramedic and some other medical malpractice. This is it. This is why we have to hold our own bar so high. So you ended up, there's so much more, but obviously people can watch the documentary. You ended up getting to the point where you were physically not in prison anymore, but now you're waiting for that claim, as you said, of innocence or returning to prison. And for 3 years, every Wednesday, you had to check a website to see if you had your freedom back or not. So talk to me about being physically free, but not being free, what that mindset was like for you. And then let's walk through to, finally getting that and where you and Gabriel and, your future from here on in.
Yeah. So, after the 3 days of that hearing to prove, all the evidence of my innocence, I eventually 2 weeks later, I had to spend 2 weeks in jail after that hearing, for the judge to make the right decision, either to let me out and wait for the CCA's decision, or I have to sit in jail, And to think back on it, how long it took for the CCA to finally make a decision. If I was in jail for that amount of time, God, county jail is totally different than prison. I mean, county jail sucks. I mean, prison, you can actually, make best of what you got, but in county jail, it's just a waiting game. So I had to wait about 2 weeks, and then, the day came where it was August 22nd, 2017. Keith Hampton. I get called to go to an attorney visit by the sheriff. The sheriff comes and gets me from my cell, and he walks me down to the visitation room, not in cuffs, not handcuffed. Normally, I get handcuffed, but not in cuffs. And I go down to the attorney visit room, and I walk into that little booth, and there's a little glass, and I'm waiting for what's going on, and I have a really good feeling of what I know is about to happen. And Keith Hampton, my attorney, walks in and says, "Hey, man, you see what this paper is right here?" And I look at it and I read it, and it says the immediate release of Greg Kelley. And man, I just broke down crying, and it felt so good knowing that I'm about to go home. And I remember me and Keith took a picture with each other right then and there. I still have it. And then he came up and followed me up to my cell to help me gather up my things and put them in a trash bag. walked down to the back door of the county jail where apparently a bunch of people were waiting, people that wanted to see me get released, and news and media and family and friends, all the people I went to high school with that believed in me, were all waiting, for me to be released and be rejoined to society. And I eventually do, and it was just an awesome moment because I immediately went to Jake Bryden's house, and we had barbecue and we went surfing, and we went wake surfing on the lake, and I just enjoyed. I wanted to do what being free meant, and went out there and just had an awesome time. But eventually all good days come to an end, and that emotionally high that I was feeling ended up coming down, and I then went into a process of waiting for, it was actually 80 something. It was like, I can't remember the exact number, but it was like 80 something weeks of having to check a website to see what the CCA is going to decide on my case.
And one of those verdicts could be you pack your stuff back into a trash bag, you walk back through that door, and you go back to your cell.
Yeah. I mean, that was a reality, man. The three decisions would have been exoneration, retrial, or go back to prison for the remainder of your sentence. So being released and being rejoined with my family, it felt great, man. I mean, but the thing about that is, you said it earlier, is that I wasn't actually free. What it means to be free, it surpasses far more than just being physically able to experience freedom. It's about knowing that you are free. You know what I mean? It's about knowing that you have the liberties to enjoy freedom, like get a job, have a car, get a mortgage, you know what I mean? Do all these things, own a gun. I mean, I couldn't even go get a gun if I wanted to. You know what I mean? Like I was still a felon on probation, or not probation, on an appeal bond. So technically, if you go during that process, I was still an inmate at the Wynn unit in Huntsville, Texas. But I was relieved on bond. And so during that whole process, every dinner that I had with my family, they were great. I mean, every family dinner that I had, I wanted to have. Even though I was physically there enjoying the presence of the people I love, there was still a dark cloud over me. You know what I mean? That a big weight, that a thorn, I guess you could say, a thorn that's stuck in my side, like, where, man, oh my gosh, I could literally go back tomorrow, And every Wednesday, the documentary crew would show up at my house with Starbucks, and to make the situation a little bit better, just to sit down and, out of all things, out of all ways to check your fate for the rest of your life, you do it on a little freaking phone, and you refresh a page on the internet, and you just refresh this list, every Wednesday at 9 a.m. to see what the decision was for the CCA. And that happened Wednesday after Wednesday after Wednesday for 80-something Wednesdays. And if you watch the documentary, you can actually tell the time span of that time by how my hair was growing, because I decided to grow my hair out that whole time. And I didn't do that for the documentary. I just did it because I was bald for 3 years. And they cut my hair short every and I have short hair now, but I wanted to just grow my hair out because I wanted to. And so you could tell how long it was during that time span. And it was so tough because every Tuesday I couldn't eat. Every Tuesday night, every Monday or Wednesday morning I couldn't eat. There's a pit in my stomach that today could go really bad, or it could go really good. But naturally, you're scared, you doubt, it hasn't gone good, most of the time for the past 3 years. And but the crazy thing, man, is that every time I refreshed the page and I didn't see my name on the list, it was like at the end of the day, you're like, man, I guess no news is good news. Now I have another week. You know what I mean? I have another week. I have another week. But it came down to that day, man, where my stress was at an all-time high, because a little insight about the actual Wednesday in New York City in our small little studio apartment. Gabriel was up there. And the reason why we're up there is because Gabriel was up there doing a dance scholarship, and I decided to follow her up there. And we're in a little studio in New York City, Manhattan, and the documentary crew would come up every Wednesday because that was the shot. I mean, that was the shot they needed. That was the ending to the story. You know, what's going to happen to Greg Kelley? So they needed to get that shot. And so being in that little studio apartment that week that I got, you know, that the decision was made, it was a very monumental week because stress was at the all-time high, because the week before that, this specific case in Texas where this guy's on death row trying to fight for his life, his name is Rodney Reed, the CCA has declared a stay of execution for him. Well, this case, the Rodney Reed case, has developed into a national public case where people like Kim Kardashian has backed him for his innocence, right, and non-involvement in the crime, with all the evidence that proves that he maybe could have not done this. The CCA still paves the way and gives the green light for him to get executed on the day that he needs to get executed. And personally, myself, I did not believe that he should have been executed on that day. I believe that they should have paused his case and look into it a little bit more. But seeing that, and a person who's actually waiting for a decision by the CCA, seeing that, I was completely scared to death, because now this thing's running in my head where it's like, man, if they're going to go and pave the way for this guy to go get executed, I don't think they're going to lose a night of sleep if they go send somebody back to prison. So I live in Texas, man. I live in a very conservative state where, you know, their reputation is, if you're going to do it anywhere, don't do it in Texas. Don't mess with Texas. And so I'm like, dude, man, I'm like, oh, man, I doubt, you know what I mean? Doubt. And I refreshed that page on November 6th of 2019. And man, I'm at the top of the list. And if you want to be anywhere on that list, you want to be on the top, because the subcategory of relief granted is on the top of that list. And when relief has been granted, it means that there has been relief to your claims. They have agreed to them. Now, I don't know which claims they agreed to, but when I clicked on it, I knew at that moment before I clicked on that link, right, before that relief link right there, I've already been granted relief. That eliminates me going back to prison. Now I need to know if I'm going to be exonerated or if they're going to retry me. And I click on it, and all 6 of my claims say relief, 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 relief. And I look at the last one, which is the 6th one, and the actual innocence claim. And I don't know if you know the history about the actual innocence claim, but, you know, getting the state of Texas to agree that you're actually innocent is like giving a bear a bath. It just doesn't happen. You know what I mean? And so I think my case went down in history as one of the first cases to actually ever be declared actually innocent and exonerated without DNA evidence. You know, and so that was very monumental in the state of Texas, because it just shows you all the things that went wrong in this case. You know, from the start to the end, and all the things that were brought to light, all the terrible things that happened in the process. You know, Janet Duty, the ex-DA, she killed herself. You know, Jonathan McCarty, drugged and raped, more victims. I went to prison for 3 years. A lot of terrible things, man. But if you look back on it, a lot of people ask me, you know, would you ever have moved into that house? And immediately, I would say hell no. Right? Hail to the no. I wouldn't. I mean, If you told me that, hey, man, do you want to go through all this? Right? You want to live this nightmare for 3 years? Like, nope, I'm going to avoid that. But at the same time, that's not how the world works. That's not how life works, right? I mean, you go through a really crappy situation. You literally get put in the gates of hell, and, you know, you get told you have to go through this and make it to the other side. And I was placed and plopped right in the middle of, you know, the gates of hell, and had to go through all of it. And to this day, you know, it's made me into the man that I am today. And I love the man that I am today. I know I'm a husband. You know what I mean? I'm a football player. I'm a college athlete. But, you know, a lot of people that go through my situation don't see this side. One, either they're killed, they give up, or they spend the rest of their time in prison because they gave up. You know, I'm very fortunate that I had the family and the support group that I had. I have the faith that I have, because I feel like my faith is my foundation. The things I learned along the way that made me strong. And now that all waterfalls into the other challenges, the small little tiny challenges that I have for the rest of my life, compared to the grand scale of things that I had to endure from the age of 18 to 23 years old. You know? Yeah, I mean, dude, there's nothing that could compare, you know? And so I think it's given me a perspective to enjoy freedom for the rest of my life. Yeah.
Well, Greg, I just want to say thank you. I mean, the documentary, not only your story, but I got to say the documentary itself is one of the most beautiful pieces of television I've ever watched. I know they're nominated for an Emmy. Is that right?
Yeah, I just got nominated last week for an Emmy.
Much deserved. I mean, I'm a huge documentary fan. That's probably why Kate and I get on well too. But, you know, it was incredible, but it shows, like I said, the ripple effect of the wrong people in the wrong positions who don't have the humility and ownership to realize they screwed up, because we all screw up, and fix their mistakes. And you know, you're living the ripple effect. But I just want to say thank you for also being so courageous, telling your story, and you know, the elements of it. There's so much for people listening to learn from. It's a huge cautionary tale for all of us in the uniform professions, as parents. I mean, you know, so many elements. But you know, I hope now that your story can help advocate for other people in the same situations, whether it's preventative or whether it's reactive, and help some other people that are in there. But thank you so much for being so generous with your time today.
Man, thank you. I appreciate it, James. Thanks for having me.